Good afternoon, everyone, and have a happy Valentine's Day 2024. I'm wishing you a wonderful day and hope that you and yours can share one another some love today. I'm sending some special wishes to my beloved, who actually never watches these videos, so maybe I'll have to make him watch just one anyway. But I hope that you all are having a good day and that you will remember to show great appreciation for those around you, your family, your spouse, your children, your friends, your loved ones, because it's kind of cool that we get to take one day a year and just dedicate it to saying, I love you, and just celebrating the love that we have for each other. Most of all, I want to say I love my Lord, and I hope you do too. And I'm just grateful to him for having blessed me with the family that I have. But all of that aside, I want to start off today by highlighting a particular product. We always start out with paying homage to some product that we love, that we enjoy, that we use. Never anything that is just sent to us and here, will you please promote this? Nope, we're not going to do that. But we often talk about Redmond Real Salt. We interviewed Daryl back in November. That was a fabulous interview. I just loved it. Well, one of the products that Redmond puts out is Redmond Re-Lyte. It is the answer to yucky Gatorade. There are lots of electrolyte products on the market, and we've tried a few. I won't touch Gatorade with a 10-foot pole, unless I'm picking it up from the ground and throwing it in the trash if I happen to find it on one of my walks. So the reason why Redmond Re-Lyte is different, besides the fact that it is very effective, is it's made with real salt. And it doesn't have sugar. It doesn't have artificial sweeteners. It doesn't have artificial colors. But it is full of good electrolytes that help to keep our bodies functioning smoothly, especially when we're under stress, like hot weather in the summer, exercise. But also, the reason why I really wanted to bring this up is a friend of mine back a couple of months ago had told me about how the one thing that really seemed to help her more than anything with her fibromyalgia pain and her POTS symptoms was using Redmond Re-Lyte. She had used some other electrolyte products, but she told me that nothing worked for her like Redmond Re-Lyte. So I started to give it to my husband because he has rheumatoid arthritis and he struggles every day. Some days are better than others, and we handle this issue primarily with food, both by eating enough and the right foods, and also by not eating other foods that can be irritating. So once I added this to his daily quart of water that I send him out with every day, he did start to feel better. It is helping him. But just the other week, I had a really amazing thing happen that truly proved to me the value of this product. An old friend of mine, an old friend and neighbor, and I were catching up in southern Kentucky, visiting with another family friend. She looked miserable. I cannot tell you, I could see the pain and agony in her face. I felt so bad for her. And so I asked her, I said, you really don't look good. And I don't mean that she didn't look well. So she proceeded to tell me about all of the things going on in her body and all the prescriptions and this and that. And it came to my mind that maybe she just needed some electrolytes. She'd had a headache for 6 days. She had a migraine for 6 days straight. She couldn't get away from it. I had some Redmond Re-Lyte with me, and so I suggested it and offered it to her. She said, "Oh, I'll try anything." I gave her 1 serving of Redmond Re-Lyte. 1! And 20 minutes later, she came back out. The headache was completely gone. She felt perfectly fine. So I gave her all of it that I had with me and gave her a link to order it. I'm suggesting you give it a try. I know that anytime I'm really busy and stressed out and on the run, and it's hot, especially, and it's hot, this stuff really helps me a lot. And all of my kids take it too. So there's our little commercial for Redmond Re-Lyte, but I really mean it. It's a great product and different from all the others. So definitely worth a try. Okay, now then, we are ready to move on into today's topic, which is feeding your family well. Anyone can do it. Now, some of what I'm going to talk about, we have talked about before. It won't be new to you. And hopefully a lot of it will be new to you. But the reason why I wanted to go over this topic today is that constantly I hear objections. And I understand those objections. I've felt the same things myself. So some of those objections may include things like, oops, I'm sorry, I'm going to go backwards a moment, because that one was not what I was looking for. Some of the objections are things like, it's too expensive. We can't afford to eat like this. Or it takes too much time. I just don't have the time to prepare my family's meals, to cook like this. Sometimes it's even, I don't know how to cook. And that's a very real problem with our modern society today. I didn't know how to cook when I got married, and I can tell you that there was more than one meal that my husband or children snubbed their noses up, and even on one occasion, the chickens and the pigs wouldn't eat it. So I understand that, but actually basic cooking skills are not that difficult to learn. And then there is the objection, well, I can't even get my kids to eat this way. They're not going to eat organ meats. They want their soda and their Lunchables. So we're going to talk about all of these objections today, and hopefully I will help open your eyes and give you some ideas to help you understand that indeed you really can feed your family well, even on a tight budget, even with very little time, even with objections like, I'm not going to eat that stuff. We could tell stories, but we're not going to tell too many. So let's start with, it's so expensive. But really, there is a very, very high cost to cheap food. Cheap food isn't really cheap. Just on a level of not impacting our daily health and our household, but I do want you to be aware of one way that this is not cheap. Our tax dollars go to the industrialized food systems, and this more than compensates for the price that we're getting at the cash register. Because even though you might be paying $1.99 for some easy, convenient processed food that you think your family will eat, you're actually sending your tax dollars out the door, not to farmers, but to food processors and to big ag companies and to chemical companies. So we've got to think about that, because real food isn't, or cheap food rather, isn't really cheap. But in other ways, it has a very high cost. The food that we eat directly impacts our bodily and even our mental health. It has an impact on every facet of our lives. Whatever we choose to put into our body will directly affect our bodies and often our brains. If we don't support what our body actually needs with real nutrients, then eventually our body is not going to function well. And then we're going to incur medical bills. And sometimes these medical bills are the ruination of families and marriages. But also when we are sick because we are not making wise choices in building up our body with good food, in protecting our body with good food, and in protecting our body by not putting in the fake stuff, if we don't do the right thing and we become ill, well, how do we provide for our families? How do we, as a mom, take care of our children? What do we do when we can't even move, maybe at all, or maybe not well, when we've lost the ability to just carry on and possibly even lose our lives? That is the very high cost of cheap food. It's just not really cheap. So let's first talk about some money saving tips. And some of these will be obvious, but I just need to state how helpful it is to shop in bulk. And while I really encourage you to shop from your local farmer, you can buy a side of beef or a quarter of beef, and it's cheaper than buying it in the grocery store. You can buy your vegetables in bulk through a CSA, or you can grow your own, but we'll come back to that. But you also can go to a big box store, or here's a photo of me shopping at my local Wegmans, which is a store I really am thankful it exists near me. And they have sections of bulk, bulk organic and bulk products. There's not a lot of bulk there, but there is bulk and the price is right. I also shop at an Amish bent and dent store up in Pennsylvania, which gets to the point of buying seconds, but they're not always seconds. Sometimes they're first quality, just overrun or overstocked. So I really am thankful to be able to shop at a store such as that. Look for a bent and dent, a grocery outlet, something like that. But also there are natural food stores in my area. Well, they're 2 hours away, but it's worth a trip now and then. But most of us will have some kind of a natural foods or bulk food store somewhere within a drivable distance, even if it's not someplace we can get to every week. So buy in bulk and look for, say, produce that is beginning to wilt. You want fresh produce, okay? You want good quality food. But a lot of times those things that are in the seconds bin are perfectly usable. Buy them up. Buy them up and put them to good use in your home. Freeze, make preparations ahead of time, freeze, but utilize the seconds. And then I always tell people to become friends, to make friends with their farmers, because in doing so, you're oftentimes, or I have oftentimes been offered either to barter. Right now, I'm bartering with a local farmer. He has a farm stand that closes for the winter, and he had a bunch of good stuff that he knew that I would use and appreciate. And I just worked out very easily a quick deal with him where I went down and picked up a lot of good, high quality stuff that I immediately put to use. And in return, I'm giving him fresh made bread and soups and just anything that I think to throw together and can drop off for him. He's a single guy and he appreciates a homemade meal. So, hey, we were already friends, but now we're taking great advantage of that friendship, advantage on both sides. And I don't mean that we are taking each other for granted, but we are taking advantage of our relationship and our resources and what we can do to help each other. And I've done this similar things over the years with other farmers and other friends. Bartering is wonderful. Sometimes you can just pick up things. Well, from the same farmer, when he was closing out at the end of the year, he put all of his meats, his freezer meats, on sale. Let me tell you, I went a little bit crazy. It was really fun to be able to pick up some things that I couldn't normally or would not normally have purchased. And yet I was able to purchase them at a deep discount, 50%. And I stuck them in my freezer and I made things with them and stuck those things in my freezer. So you don't have to think about, it's so expensive to eat well. You have to go to the grocery store or go to the farm stand and everything is so expensive and blah, 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 blah. It doesn't have to be that way. But another tip about saving money is keeping meals simple as well. You don't have to stock up on expensive ingredients or international or specialty things. You can make your own or you can do without. Just keep your meals simple. And keeping meals simple also delves into the aspect of how to actually execute and save time. So we've talked about some ways that we can save money. Oh, I failed to really go into growing your own. We will be doing a series coming up soon. I expect by mid-March to be starting a series on how to grow your own food, even just in pots and even just little things in your backyard. So growing your own is obviously a very good way to save money, whether you can have backyard chickens. And many people can. In my community, we're not allowed to have farm animals, but we can have 6 chickens. Now I'm pushing the envelope a little bit. I'm going to go a little over that, but they're in my backyard and not bothering anybody. I will raise things like duck and quail, and probably just a few meat birds this year. We have less than an acre, but there's a lot we can do on this acreage, on this little bit of land. I should have thought to put up the slide I have of a family in Southern California who live on 1/10 of an acre, and they provide nearly all of their family of 5's needs, including honey, goat milk, eggs, chicken, goat meat, and produce and herbs. And they not only provide for their families, but they actually earn a living by selling to farmers markets and restaurants. So if you can do it on 1/10 of an acre, you can do it on 1/2 an acre or an acre. Or in my case, we have 7/10 of an acre and I'm planting a food forest. So I do have fruit and vegetables and nuts. I just got some chestnuts to plant and they should be producing within 3 to 5 years. So you can grow food and save money also, and make money at that, sell your extra. But now on to making it easy. Preparing good food does take more time than taking a package out of the freezer or opening a can of soup. It does take more time than that. And of course, there's also time in cleanup. But it's important and necessary that we take the steps to provide better food for our families than what they can get from packages and boxes and McDonald's for that matter. But in order to make the most of our time and simplify things, we need a few good tools. So one of my most basic recommendations is just a good set of knives and a good wood cutting board, wooden, not acrylic and not glass. Wooden because it resists bacterial growth naturally and because it saves the edges of your knives, unlike glass and acrylic. I'm not suggesting either that you spend an extraordinary amount of money on knives. I don't own a single knife that costs over maybe $70. My favorite knife actually is this knife. And it is a Nakiri style knife, which is a Japanese utility or chef's knife. This one is made by Henkel's. And I can survive in my kitchen just fine with nothing but this knife. So yeah, $70 is a little bit more than most of us pay for knives, but this thing is high carbon steel, so it stays sharp, it holds an edge. I meant to grab also my knife sharpener that I use a couple times a week to keep the blade sharp, and a honing steel to keep it straight. So good knives. You don't have to have a whole bunch. You just need to have one or two good knives. All right. It looks like in that photo, in front of my Nakiri is I think a $30 or a $40 chef's knife from Victronex. It is not high carbon steel. It is stainless steel, so it doesn't hold a sharp edge as long, but it is very easy to sharpen and it is very affordable. And then I have a utility knife and a paring knife, and those were like $25, $30. I keep the paring knife sharp again, just as I do my others. And the utility knife I use for everything from slicing tomatoes to occasionally maybe a roll or bread one. I don't have a photo of it, but I also keep, of course, a good but not expensive bread knife. Mercer is the brand, and I bought several and gave them as gifts to some of our kids for Christmas, and I think they ran in the $25 range. Good bread knife. So invest a little bit in knives. And then my next most favorite tool is my immersion blender. I have a KitchenAid immersion blender. I actually have two. One I use for soap making. I have had other immersion blenders. They have not lasted as well. The KitchenAid motor is strong. It keeps on going no matter what. And you can buy these in kits so that they come with containers for making mayonnaise and salad dressing or anything else you might want. Food processor containers, small food processor containers, as well as a wire whisk. I have a cordless KitchenAid and I have a corded KitchenAid. I use both. They're excellent tools. They're so easy for making smoothies, making salad dressing, making mayonnaise, pureeing vegetables in soup. They just have a multitude of really, really useful purposes that are very, very time saving. And then my next favorite tool is my Vitamix. I use my Vitamix faithfully. I have used it for years and years. It's more than a blender. It is a macerator. It is a supercharged mixer blender of everything. So I do large batches of smoothies in it, like I did this morning. I'm, again, time saving as well. I make everything in batches. The immersion blender and the Vitamix make easy work of this because I can take soup. I can make 3 gallons of soup if I want to. And with the immersion blender, I can blend it all up or whatever parts of it I want. With the Vitamix, I can make large amounts of my fermented ketchup and other things. So again, saving time by doing in batches and also just making it super, super easy. I do have both a VitaClay pot and an instant pot. The VitaClay is completely non-toxic. You can use it to make yogurt. You can use it as a slow cooker. It's a very useful tool that I do like. I tend to pull out my Instant Pot more than anything, though. Just last night, I used it to cook a pork roast, and I just put it on slow cooker setting. And it was very helpful. It is very helpful also to have good steel pans. I'm talking heavy steel pans. I would discourage you from using any nonstick. Even the non-toxic nonstick, the surface does not last very long, so you're throwing money away. But a good heavy steel pan like Calphalon or my favorites are Silga and David Burke. Silga I purchase at Home Goods. I have links for almost everything that I am talking about today. They are on our resource page. This includes the knives, the Vitamix, the immersion blender, all of that. But when it comes to heavy duty pots and pans that are so useful, they prevent food from burning. They save food from sticking, particularly if you use them properly. And with the right ones, you can make large batches of food, of stock, of soup, of this or that or the other thing, like my mirepoix and all of that, which I'll talk about in a moment too. But I don't have links for my favorite ones because I buy them from my favorite store. And I would encourage you to do the same to save money. I go to Home Goods and TJ Maxx or Marshalls, and I shop their kitchen sections regularly, looking for things that I need or that would be have a useful purpose in my kitchen. So I have purchased these beautiful, super heavy Italian Silga pans at less than half the retail cost. So the most I've ever spent on those pans, I think, is probably $50. And that sounds like a lot, but that's on a big, heavy pan. I have also purchased a lot of David Burke heavy steel pans. I have an induction burner, and these work on my induction burners. Then I also have purchased at Home Goods or TJ Maxx very large, extra large size stock pots. My largest stock pot was at retail, I think, a $400 stock pot, and I did pay $100 for it, but I use it often, and it was worth the cost because I can do so much with it at once. So I can make at least 3 gallons of stock. It actually will hold 4, I think. So I can do a large quantity all at once, and that saves me time. So again, with the right tools, you're going to save time and you're going to save money. So here are some photos of my favorites. There's the immersion blender from KitchenAid, the Vitamix, and there is a nice set of David Burke pots and pans. They're really, really nice pans. And besides that, they look pretty too. So why not? Okay, moving on. Good food should not be complicated, but it can be complicated. It's as complicated as we make it. It's not often that I would make something like beef Wellington. Have I ever made beef Wellington? Oh, I don't know. Coq au vin. Well, actually, that's not so complicated. It sounds complicated, and it takes time, but most of it is waiting time. But there are lots of sauces that we can make to jazz up the foods that we are eating. There are lots of specialty meats and specialty things that we can be preparing, but we don't need to make it difficult. Save the difficult things for special occasions. And even on special occasions, I usually am making simple foods. And I'm starting with preparations that I've done ahead of time, and then I'm putting together and making some wonderful, glorious feast. And I've never had anyone complain, at least not directly to me, maybe to somebody else. So keep your meals simple. Don't focus on complicated processes. Things like, eggs for breakfast, oatmeal for breakfast, which instead of cereal, because there are almost no breakfast cereals I could ever recommend. All that they do is temporarily fill your body with ingredients that your body can't interpret as belonging there, as something that should become part of you. And so they have oftentimes allergic issues and that kind of thing. But breakfast at our house is usually as simple as frying up or scrambling some eggs. Oftentimes I do my famous French creamed eggs, which taste amazing, and it's actually very simple to do. We also do pancakes and waffles with sourdough or fermented dough. Oatmeal, as I mentioned. I'll toss leftover quinoa or rice into scrambled eggs for the kids with some cheese. So all of that to say breakfast should be actually nourishing, but it also can be delicious and good for you, but it doesn't have to be complicated. The same with lunches and dinners. You don't have to prepare complicated things day in and day out. Just keep it simple. We have a lot of recipes up on our website that are simple to prepare, and we are always adding more. Now, if you always have a few basic ingredients on hand, like I just had my husband pick up actually 2 big bags full of organic onions. I have onions growing outside on my deck, but right now I don't have any to pick to use. And so onions and garlic, they are 2 staples in my household. And then I make my mirepoix and other things with them. So I prepare ahead. So on this last point here, prepare basic components in batches for use in coming weeks. I have gone over some of this in past episodes, so you can look back over the last couple of months. Back in early January, I showed how I make my anti-inflammatory and Asian flavor infused I don't even know what I call it. What do I call it? But it's grated ginger, turmeric, minced garlic, freshly cracked black pepper, and I simmer this in ghee and olive oil. And I just yesterday finished a quart jar of this that I made 5 weeks ago. And I cook a lot. So I made about a half gallon of this preparation and my mirepoix. And I use both interchangeably. You're looking for different flavors and different purposes, but the mirepoix is simply 2 parts onion, 1 part each celery and carrot. And I add 2 cloves of garlic per onion. That's not a classic mirepoix, but there's really almost nothing I ever make that doesn't have garlic. So I just throw it in there instead of adding it later. And I simmer it to soften the vegetables. And then it's ready to scoop out as needed into soups and stews and eggs and meats and whatever I'm making. I just actually for lunch, I finished something that I threw together using the mirepoix. Another thing I'm going to suggest is that I mix ground meats together, including pork, venison, and ground beef. I mix them all together and I brown them in large batches and then freeze in 2-pound pouches. So a few days ago, I took out one of those 2-pound bags and I added about a half a cup of the mirepoix and a quart of chicken stock. And that's another thing that I'm suggesting you make in batches. You do it once a week and freeze it in quarts or half-gallon jars, wonderful, or keep it in the fridge with sealed with a fat layer, the schmaltz in the case of chicken. Then that is another key base ingredient to have done ahead of time. So I just combined the stock, the mirepoix, and the ground meat. And the other thing I added that I'm also suggesting you do in batches is grated cheese. I have an attachment to my KitchenAid that I must admit I at first did not appreciate very much when my husband got it for me, because I like to just stand there doing this with a box grater. No, I really don't. So now I'm using that grater attachment, and I'm just grating up 2 pounds, 4, 5 pounds at a time and putting it in bags, freezing it, and keeping a couple pounds in the refrigerator at all time. With all of those components, you can do a multitude of things, a multitude of dishes. And you can make them all taste different, even though you're using many of the same components. So you'll change flavors by using the ginger, garlic, turmeric preparation as opposed to the mirepoix. You can use beef, lamb, or pork stock or venison stock instead of chicken stock. That changes up the flavor. You can use different kinds of meats. And then, of course, I have a recipe on our website for brining chicken or duck or turkey, whatever poultry you'd like to brine. I don't mix up the brine ingredients ahead of time because they're so simple, but I will brine batches of chicken. I might do 6 or 8 chickens at a time, and I buy the whole chicken to save money. And then I break it down with my handy dandy chef's knife, my Nakiri, or I have a cleaver that I sometimes use. And I keep all of the organ meats and I put it in brine overnight. And then I'll roast it off, or I'll put some of it in freezer bags and stick it in the freezer to grill or roast fresh at a later date. But I will definitely roast a couple of chickens extra at a time so that I can make chicken salad or set some aside for soup. So you see, anytime that you can make any basic component in quantity and just divvy it up and keep it in the fridge or the freezer, you can put together a meal in 5 minutes. It is so easy. And again, you don't want to serve the same thing every day. So, vary it up with different spices, and maybe you make something, serve it over pasta. What I finished up last night, I added heavy cream to, and it made this really rich, delicious, I don't know what to call it. One of the girls said, "What is that, Mama?" And I kind of just laughed because they should know by now that there's not very much that I make that actually has a name. I just look at what I have and I throw it together. But I might actually have to come up with a name for this because it was pretty good. Now, in the fall, when the pumpkins and the squash are coming in, I will batch roast, puree in my Vitamix, and stick that in the freezer. So there you go. Now you've got a vegetable for later, or you've got something to throw in with chicken stock to make soup. I do keep in bulk canned organic tomatoes. Muir Glen is my favorite, fire roasted. So I will keep things like that on hand as well. And I always buy my brown rice or quinoa pasta in bulk, and I keep that in my food storage area. So I hope I'm giving you some ideas here for things that you might do. Oh, I see. You have the neck knife. Oh, the neck knife. Like Patrick, and I think you're meaning to say, and Doug wears it. It's a knife that you wear it like a necklace. I've actually seen a kid get really badly hurt on one of those because they grabbed it from somebody else thinking it was like a toy. So be careful with that. So Carmen and Tambray, you have a knife made by Patrick with MT knives, and you may need to splurge on your own in May. Yep, you may, because having a good knife it just saves so much time. It also saves wrist because when you have a good sharp knife, it's much easier to slice. And I will say, I have one friend who objects to having sharp knives, and she literally does everything in her kitchen with one paring knife. That is rather dull. She's afraid of cutting herself with a sharp knife, but you actually have a much greater chance of cutting yourself on a dull knife because you have to put so much effort into it, and then it slips because it's not sharp enough to glide in. So sharp knives. Okay, and Carmen, again, your sister was in a horrible head-on accident. Oh, I'm sorry. So that's why you haven't been here, and I noticed that. Okay, so thank you for coming back. We missed you, but we had noticed that you weren't present either. So thank you. Welcome back, and I hope your sister is doing well. Okay, so Keep it simple. Keep your good, helpful tools on hand. Prepare in bulk. Make preparations in bulk. And here we go, of course. So here are some ideas, again, that I've already talked about things that we can do ahead of time, like the broth, the mirepoix, the ground meat. Fermented foods, I don't talk enough about them. Fermented foods are a very important part of our diet, and we will do an episode just on that very, very soon. But when I make something like fermented sauerkraut or fermented garlic dill pickles, I make them gallons at a time. Typically not less than 1 gallon at a time, but more often 5 gallons at a time. And the worst part, the hardest part about that is cleaning up the mess when you're done. Okay, so I'm going to move on here because I know that this is the last big objection. My kids aren't going to eat that stuff, and sometimes it's my husband isn't going to touch it. And I do hear that a lot. It makes me upset now when I hear a husband say, I'm not going to eat that, because come on, your wife is trying to feed you well, keep you healthy and strong, and help your family to be well. So husbands, appreciate her efforts. Don't complain, and don't be a bad example to your children. All right, that aside, one of the key ways that I was able to help my kids to eat properly, to eat good quality foods, and to eschew the bad stuff. Well, one thing isn't on here, really important before I even get into the rest. Don't even have that stuff in your house. Get rid of the cookies, the candies, the sodas, the sugar, especially white sugar. Get rid of the packaged prepared stuff. Just don't even bring it in. I don't allow it in. And sometimes I jokingly refer to myself as the food Nazi, but in my house, I am in charge of my kitchen. I am in charge of my family's health. And that means absolutely I will not allow bad food in my house. It goes in the trash if I find it. And my kids can tell you that more than once things have been trashed. But I always compensate by making sure there is a good food in replacement of that bad food. So for instance, a few months ago, I was out of town and my kids ran out of homemade mayonnaise. It takes literally 2 minutes, including measuring and cleaning up, to make mayonnaise, people. It is super easy. My cats are about to get into a cat fight, so there may be some commotion in just a moment. One kitty is supposed to be upstairs because the other kitty attacks him, but he came down to be with me. I'm going to move forward and hope that there isn't a major war about to break out. But I think there is. Okay, so now that I've lost my train of thought. Oh, the mayonnaise. My son Mason bought a jar of Hellmann's mayonnaise, and it felt like a punch in the gut. I did feel just a little bit guilty throwing it in the trash because I knew he had spent money on it. So what I did was I immediately made a quart of wonderful mayonnaise, which he enjoyed. But I also bought a quart of Primal Kitchen organic avocado mayonnaise, and I put that in the cupboard so that if ever they run out again when I'm not home, they can pull that out. And he's okay with that, as is everyone else. But I try not to run out of things like that. I just made mayonnaise 2 days ago, made quite a bit of it along with salad dressing. It's in there. I keep up most of the time. But in case of emergency, I do keep something as a backup that is acceptable, a compromise. It's not as good as my homemade stuff, but it's a compromise. So all of that to say, I don't allow bad food in my house, period. Okay. I have had all of my children in the kitchen with me from the time they could stand up on a stool to the counter. I could give them a butter knife or even a toy knife and a cutting board and a carrot or something that they could stand there and think that they were doing something to help me, that they were involved in the meal prep. And of course, as they got older, I taught them how to make bread. I taught them how to make stock. I taught them how to make butter and everything that you could possibly want to make. But because they were involved in the process of preparing food, they took ownership of it. It made them want to eat the foods that I wanted them to be eating, the foods that were good for their bodies, not harmful. Our children also always had a hand in producing most of our food. Now, not all of you can have a cow to milk or chickens or whatever. And I currently only have a few backyard chickens for eggs and to recycle my kitchen scraps. But if you can do anything, be it plant seeds in a pot and put it out on the balcony if you're in an apartment, anything you can do that your children can be involved in so that they feel like they are helping with growing and preparing and just being part of the food that you are putting before them, it engages them and it makes them want to participate in the eating of good things. I also trained them by putting on their plate small amounts of new foods and small amounts of things that I knew that they might not initially like or want to try. So I didn't expect them to eat a whole serving of sauerkraut at first or whatever, but I did expect them to try, just have a spoonful. So I always gave an appropriate amount of every food I wanted to introduce them to. And almost without exception, they accepted that food and wanted more. This even worked with kids who weren't part of our family who would come and eat with us on a regular basis. One mom brought me a package of hot dogs and they were coming over once or twice a week. She said, just keep these in your freezer so at least my son will eat when he's at your house. Those hot dogs went to the chickens. I shouldn't have even probably fed them to the chickens. I taught that child and other children to enjoy real food and good food. And now a couple of those children, a few actually that I can think of, one is a young mom and she's doing all the stuff that she saw me doing in my house. Another, actually her brother, is hunting and I think they raise chickens and they're eating good quality foods. And still another who was really, he grew up on very processed junk food. He would come to my house and he didn't want to eat our lunches. But I did the same thing with him that I did with my kids. I gave him a plate with a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And I said, just try it. That's all. And then I dangle the carrot. I make some yummy dessert. Maybe it's an oatmeal cookie or maybe it's ice cream, homemade ice cream. But I have something to entice them to get past their hesitancy, to discover that they actually can eat these foods and like these foods, and then they want more. And that last kid, he's now in his 30s. He learned to love everything I put before him, and he always told his mom that Mrs. Diaz was the best cook ever. I'm not the best cook ever, but that, of course, made me feel good and told me that I was accomplishing exactly what I wanted to accomplish. How important and how good is that? When it comes to things like organ meats or other foods that kids don't just naturally want to eat, especially if they're not introduced to it as kids, you can sneak a little in. I frequently combine organ meats, ground organ meats, with my muscle meat. So I make chili and spaghetti sauce and all kinds of other things with with that, I sneak a little in. My kids know it's in there, so there's no sneaking to it anymore. But initially, that's what I did. I had to be sneaky. They weren't onto it. Eventually, they caught on, and there was a little bit of griping, and then it was fine. Now, I have a grandson in Louisville, little Brooks, whose mama has raised him to love sourdough bread and liver pate. That's something that most of my kids have also learned to love. But little Brooks, he'll take that piece of sourdough heaped with either raw butter or chicken liver pate. He eats the top off of it, the butter or the pate, and he hands it back to his mama and asks for more. She brought him up that way from the beginning. He now at 3 years old, oh my, he just had a birthday. He appreciates and enjoys good food, and his younger brother is learning to as well. Here we have a photo of a little guy, son of one of our, a friend of mine from Weston A. Price Foundation, and he is drinking bone broth in his bottle, and he loves it. I have another friend. She brought her child up on fermented pickles and sauerkraut, and again, organ meats and raw milk and yogurt and bone broth. When you start from the beginning, it's much easier. When you're starting with kids who are past infancy or toddlerhood, you have to use a little bit of sneakiness and a little bit of bribery, perhaps. But you can train them. It's all about training. And you can retrain the taste buds. So if you're used to Doritos and Oscar Mayer hot dogs, you can retrain a child or your own taste buds to instead appreciate sourdough bread and bone broth and anything else that you might want to put in front of them. But another really key thing that I see many parents completely failing at, and I don't mean this to be ugly or judgmental, but I see it over and over and over again. And that is that parents often forget to parent. When it comes to their children's dietary needs, more often than not, I see parents giving in to their children's whims. They've trained them to want the foods that are actually harmful to their body and to deny the foods that are good for their bodies. And they've done this by giving in to their children. So you go to a party or a potluck. Maybe you don't have so much processed, devitalized foods at your house, but then you go somewhere else and the kids want all the bad stuff. Well, if you've trained them to want good food, that's a step in the right direction. Then if you reward them by saying, no to soda, where I used to sometimes at potlucks, I'd say maybe once a month, my kids could have half a soda. But the majority of their food and beverage was very good. Now I don't allow soda at all, and everybody's fine with that. But I typically have kombucha, ginger beer, kefir soda, and things like that around, so they're fine. But when we go other places, that tends to be problematic. And most of the time I see parents just throwing up their hands and saying, there's nothing I can do. Here you go. You have just ceased parenting and instead stepped into the role of your child's best friend. The cats are getting more vocal in the background. I have a feeling. Okay, excuse me. No, we're almost done. I'm going to push through. Okay. So offer rewards, train from the beginning, know that you can retrain, be the parent, not their cute best friend, sneak it in. But most of all, just expect your family to eat good food and teach them to eschew the bad food. Also, briefly, another strategy for when you are other places, this is especially helpful for parties and potlucks. Don't send your child into a a negative food environment like a party or a potluck on an empty stomach. Give them good, satiating food before you even leave the house. And then if it's a potluck, take enough good food with you. It can be treats too. It can be special things that your kids don't get very often. But when they have the option of something yummy and delicious and special that you've prepared, it's going to help them to say no to all the other crud. So that's my advice. You can get over this, the kid who who turns their nose up at everything. Your husbands, or in some cases wives, whichever it may be, that's another issue, and you'll have to deal with that. So, okay, I think I've about covered it. Yep, that's it. So I don't see. Oh, what kind of oil do you use in mayo? I use good quality olive oil that is not bitter. So I tend to use Carapelli Organic Unfiltered, or a Greek olive oil, Dimitri olive oil, which you have to order online. It's single source organic from Greece. That's an excellent and smooth olive oil. I will use some organic, unfiltered sunflower oil occasionally, not very much. Organic avocado oil is a compromise, and I will use that mixed with olive oil to make my mayonnaise. Okay. I'm looking to see if I'm missing anything, and I don't think I am. So if anybody has a question, pop it in right now, because otherwise I'm about ready to separate the cats and let the dog outside. But I want to tell you too about what's coming up in just the coming weeks. We're going to have some really exciting interviews with some of the speakers at our upcoming God-Given Food as Medicine conference, happening April 19th through 21st in Little Wirtz, Virginia. There are lots of hotels and Airbnbs in the area, and we would love to have you come. It is going to be phenomenal. We have Mandy Bloom coming. We have Stephen Hussey coming from Resource Your Health. We have Kate, we have a midwife. We have 2 PhD clinical nutritionists. We have a naturopathic doctor. We have, we have 2 surprise speakers. We're just waiting to verify. And I'm really excited about both of them, but I'm just not going to mention names right now. But we'd love to see you at our God-Given Food as Medicine conference. It is going to be fantastic, and we will be interviewing many of our speakers in the coming weeks. So be watching, come back. We're so grateful that you've tuned in. Please like, subscribe, and share. We really appreciate that. It helps us a lot. It helps the algorithms and all of that, but it literally does help us. So if you can do those things, we appreciate it. And until next time, I am going to go separate these kitties, let the dog out, and go pick up my daughter from her job. But I'm also going to enjoy the rest of my day and celebrate Valentine's Day with my beloved, and I hope you will do the same with those around you whom you love. Happy Valentine's every day, everyone, and take good care until next time. Bye-bye.